My net worth today stands at $25 million. I built that from a single rented warehouse on the south side of Chicago and a delivery truck that stalled every other morning. I've faced down hostile takeovers, survived recessions, and sat across from men who tried to bankrupt me with nothing more than a handshake and a smile. But truly, none of that prepared me for what I witnessed at my mother-in-law's 70th birthday dinner. There, at the head of the table, in a seat that quite literally had my name on it, sat my wife's boyfriend. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stood there for exactly 7 seconds. Then I turned and walked out. That night, my wife called me 68 times. I didn't answer once. The Whitmore dinner was held at Grannon Halstead, one of those old-school Chicago steakhouses. You know the type. Dark wood paneling, low amber lighting, and the kind of waiters who remember your drink order before you even sit down. I had paid for half of Patricia Whitmore's birthday celebration, the private dining room, the wine pairing, the custom cake flown in from New York. All of it was charged discreetly to my corporate card. I was 40 minutes late, not because I didn't care, but because I had just closed a $60 million logistics expansion deal in Indianapolis. My CFO and I had been on the phone with lenders until 6:12 p.m. I left the office in my navy suit, tie slightly loosened, still carrying the adrenaline of a deal that would secure jobs for 200 employees. As I stepped through the restaurant's heavy glass doors, I remember thinking how proud Lauren would be. We'd been married for 14 years. She used to sit across from me at our tiny kitchen table when the company was just an idea and say, "One day, Daniel, you're going to own the skyline." I truly believed she believed that. The hostess led me down the corridor toward the private room. I could hear laughter before I reached it. Loud, theatrical laughter. Patricia's voice, sharp and bright as broken crystal. The doors opened, and the room went quiet. It wasn't the kind of quiet that happens when someone important arrives. It was the kind of quiet that happens when a secret gets exposed. The table was round, seating 12, with white linen, crystal stemware, and a tall arrangement of white orchids in the center. And there, at the head of the table, directly across from the door, sat Ethan Blake, 32 years old, personal trainer, smooth jawline, expensive haircut, the kind of man who wears his watch loose so it catches the light when he gestures. He was in my seat. Lauren sat to his right. Patricia sat to his left. Ethan's hand was resting on the back of Lauren's chair. No one said a word. Patricia recovered first. She dabbed her lips with a napkin and gave me that thin, diplomatic smile she used at charity luncheons. "Well," she said lightly, "look who decided to show up." I didn't look at her. I looked at Lauren. Her face was pale, but not shocked, not surprised. Prepared. "Daniel," she said softly, "we started without you." Dinner was getting cold. My eyes dropped to the place setting in front of Ethan. My monogrammed napkin ring, the small printed card that read Daniel Carter, folded and tucked under his plate. Ethan cleared his throat and offered a tight smile. "Hey, man." The air in the room felt thick, butter and wine, and something sour underneath it all. I walked forward slowly, setting the mahogany gift box in my hand onto the table. Inside was a Cartier sapphire brooch I'd acquired at auction. Patricia liked to brag about having taste. The piece had cost $87,000. "Happy birthday, Patricia," I said evenly. Her eyes flicked to the box, then back to my face. "You're late," she replied. "I had business." She let out a soft, dismissive chuckle. "There's always business." I finally allowed myself to look at Ethan directly. He didn't move, didn't stand, didn't offer the seat. Lauren's fingers tightened around her wineglass. "Daniel," she said, her voice carefully measured. "Ethan's been helping Mom with some renovation ideas for the lake house. He's been very present, very supportive." "Supportive?" That word landed harder than an insult. Patricia leaned back in her chair. "We needed someone who actually values family time," she added sweetly. The implication hung there. "You don't." The younger cousins avoided eye contact. Patricia's sister stared at her plate. A waiter hovered awkwardly near the wall. I became aware of how still I was, how steady my breathing remained. 14 years of marriage, 2 houses, countless holidays, and this was the performance they had chosen. "Daniel," Patricia said, gesturing vaguely toward the far end of the table, "we can have them bring another chair, or you can squeeze in by the kids." The kids' table? I felt something inside me shift. Not anger, not heartbreak. Recognition. This wasn't impulsive. This was arranged. Lauren met my eyes. There was guilt there, but also something else. Defiance. I reached down, picked up the small place card with my name on it, and held it between my fingers for a moment. Then I set it back down. "I see," I said quietly. No shouting, no dramatic gestures. I turned to Patricia again. "I hope 70 treats you kindly." Then I walked out. No one followed. The restaurant corridor felt colder than before. The valet brought my car around within minutes. I sat behind the wheel, hands resting lightly, staring straight ahead. My phone buzzed before I even left the parking lot. "Lauren." I declined the call. It rang again and again. By the time I reached Lakeshore Drive, I'd missed 12 calls. By midnight, there were 68 voicemails stacked one after another, text messages lighting up my screen. "Where are you? You embarrassed me. We need to talk. Don't do this." I drove past our house. Instead, I checked into the Langham. As I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of the suite overlooking the Chicago River, watching the city lights reflect off the water, I realized something with absolute clarity. That dinner wasn't the beginning. It was the reveal. Because I had known for 3 months, and I had been preparing. I didn't discover the affair because I was suspicious. I discovered it because I'm meticulous. 3 months before Patricia's birthday dinner, I noticed a discrepancy in one of our joint credit card statements. It wasn't large enough to trigger alarm, but not small enough to ignore. A $4,860 charge to a boutique furniture store in Lincoln Park, a store Lauren had never mentioned. When you build a business from nothing, you learn that small leaks sink ships. I didn't confront her. I asked for a duplicate statement. 2 weeks later, another charge. A condo association fee, different address, West Loop. I ran the address quietly. The unit was leased under a shell LLC. That LLC was funded from our joint account, and the registered contact number traced back to Ethan Blake. The same Ethan Blake who had started training Lauren 6 months prior. When I pulled the building's parking garage access logs through a friend who managed the property, I saw my wife's Mercedes entering the garage 17 times in 8 weeks. I remember sitting in my office that night, the Chicago skyline glowing beyond the glass, staring at the spreadsheet like it was a merger report. There's a moment in business when you realize a partner has breached trust. The reaction isn't rage, it's recalibration. Lauren wasn't careful. She assumed I wouldn't look. Or perhaps she assumed I would never dare to. Our prenuptial agreement, signed 14 years ago when my company was worth less than $2 million, had been amended twice. Each amendment was initiated by me. An infidelity clause, asset shielding, personal trust structures. Lauren had signed them all. At the time she'd laughed, "Daniel, who are you planning to cheat with? A warehouse forklift?" I'd smiled. Now I saw the irony. 3 months before Patricia's dinner, I hired a private investigator. Discreet, former federal, cost me $40,000. Worth every penny. Within 10 days, I had photographs. Lauren entering the West Loop condo, Ethan carrying grocery bags inside. Lauren and Ethan leaving together at 7:12 a.m., her hair damp, his hand on her lower back. The PI also documented something more interesting. Ethan's personal finances, maxed out credit cards, 2 civil suits for unpaid loans, a pattern of attaching himself to older, affluent women, predatory behavior, dressed in cologne, and gym memberships. I should have felt anger. Instead, I felt something colder, disappointment. Not just in her, but in myself. 14 years of believing stability meant loyalty. 14 years of assuming that providing comfort meant providing security. But comfort can breed entitlement, and entitlement, when mixed with insecurity, breeds resentment. Lauren had grown quieter over the past 2 years. My company expanded. My schedule intensified. I brought her on trips when I could. I bought her the lake house her mother adored. I paid off Patricia's medical debt when insurance refused coverage. I thought I was building a fortress. Perhaps she felt trapped inside it. Still, betrayal is not therapy. It is a choice. 2 months before the dinner, I tested her. "How's Ethan working out?" I asked casually over breakfast one morning. She didn't look up from her phone. "He's great, motivated, driven." "Driven toward what?" I asked lightly. She shrugged. "Some people just want more than a 9 to 5, Daniel." There was an edge to it, an accusation disguised as commentary. I let it pass. That same week, I instructed my CFO to separate certain assets from our marital accounts under the pretext of tax restructuring. He didn't question me. He never does. I moved consulting fees into a holding company established prior to our marriage. I transferred investment dividends into a trust managed exclusively by my board-appointed fiduciary. It was legally airtight. Lauren would retain her personal design studio earnings. The lake house was technically under a Carter Holdings subsidiary. The downtown house was mine before the marriage. I was not stripping her. I was insulating myself. A week before Patricia's birthday, the PI sent a final report. Audio, Lauren inside the condo, her voice unmistakable. "I'm tired of being invisible," she told Ethan. "Daniel thinks money fixes everything." Ethan's reply was smoother. "You deserve someone who actually sees you." Sees you. I replayed that line several times. What does being seen mean? Being adored? Being validated? Or simply being desired by someone less intimidating? I shut my laptop and poured a glass of bourbon. I didn't cry. I didn't confront her. I waited. Because public humiliation is not spontaneous. It's strategic. Patricia had always disliked me, not because I was unkind, but because I was self-made. Her late husband had inherited wealth. I built mine. She resented that I never sought her approval. When the dinner invitation arrived for Patricia's 70th, formal attire required, I noticed something else. Ethan's name on the guest list under family friend. I almost declined. Then I decided to attend, not to cause a scene, but to confirm. The dinner was a stage, and I needed to see how bold they were willing to be. When I walked into that room and saw Ethan in my seat, I wasn't shocked. I was vindicated. The seat wasn't about comfort. It was a declaration. You are replaceable. Lauren didn't object because she believed I would swallow it. For the sake of reputation, for the sake of optics, for the sake of marriage. But a business partner who attempts a hostile takeover of your identity must be dealt with decisively. As I stood in the Langham suite that night, watching the river move steadily below, my phone still vibrating against the marble countertop, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer her husband. I was her liability, and liabilities, when left unchecked, bankrupt you. The next morning, I met with Victoria Hale. Victoria Hale did not look impressed when I told her my wife had seated her boyfriend at the head of her mother's birthday dinner. She listened without interruption, long fingers folded over a legal pad, eyes sharp behind understated tortoiseshell frames. 50 years old, corporate litigator, former federal prosecutor, the kind of woman who didn't waste time on theatrics. When I finished, she asked one question. Do you want reconciliation or do you want resolution? Resolution, I said. She nodded once. Then you need to stop reacting and start documenting. That was Monday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Lauren went public. It started subtly. An Instagram post, a black and white photo of her looking out a window, captioned, "Some women spend years begging to be seen. Some men only see balance sheets." It garnered sympathy quickly. Her friends commented heart emojis and vague affirmations. By evening, Patricia escalated it, a Facebook post from her account. After raising a daughter to value family, it's heartbreaking to watch a husband prioritize business over love. We pray for humility. That one was shared dozens of times. I didn't respond. By Thursday, a lifestyle blogger in Chicago posted a blind item. Prominent logistics CEO rumored to be emotionally distant, driving wedge in long-term marriage. Emotionally distant. I was in Indianapolis securing jobs when they arranged that dinner. Lauren called again that night. I let it ring. On Friday, Patricia crossed the line. At 11:40 a.m., as I was reviewing quarterly projections in the 23rd floor conference room of Carter Logistics, my assistant knocked urgently. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice tight, "there's a situation downstairs." "What kind of situation?" "Your wife and her mother." I stepped into the lobby. Lauren stood near the reception desk, composed, but visibly upset. Patricia was louder. Employees had gathered at a distance, pretending not to stare. "You can't ignore her forever," Patricia was saying, her voice caring. "A marriage is not a business contract, Daniel." Lauren's eyes found mine. They looked tired, but there was calculation behind them. "Daniel," she said softly, "we need to talk." "We can schedule something through counsel," I replied evenly. Patricia's mouth dropped open. "Counsel? What, are you divorcing a supplier?" There were phones out. I saw them recording. Lauren took a step closer. "You walked out of my mother's birthday dinner and haven't come home. People are talking. You're humiliating me." I held her gaze. "You humiliated me first." Her jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" Behind her, I saw Ethan across the street, leaning casually against a parked SUV, sunglasses, arms crossed. He didn't approach. He observed. The symbolism was almost elegant. Patricia's voice rose again. 14 years, Daniel, and you can't even sit through one dinner. What kind of husband storms out because a guest took his seat?" "Guests?" That word again. "You're welcome to leave," I said calmly. Lauren's composure cracked slightly. "So that's it? You're just done?" "I'm handling it." "Handling what?" "Our restructuring." Patricia scoffed loudly. "Listen to him. You talk about your wife like she's inventory." I turned toward the receptionist. "Please have security escort them out if they refuse to leave." Gasps rippled softly across the lobby. Lauren stared at me, disbelief and anger mixing behind her eyes. "You're going to regret this," she whispered. "Maybe," I replied, "but regret is cheaper than humiliation." They left 10 minutes later. The video was online within the hour, clipped carefully to make it appear that I had kicked out my wife without provocation. The narrative shifted quickly, cold, controlling, emotionally abusive. By evening, my board requested a meeting. I sat at the head of the long walnut table in the executive conference room. 8 directors, 2 legal advisors. "I'm aware of the rumors," I began. "They are false and they are strategic." "Strategic? How?" one director asked. "My wife has been engaged in an extramarital relationship for at least 3 months," I said plainly. "I have evidence." Silence. I slid a folder across the table. Photographs, financial transfers, condo lease documents. "I have not responded publicly because escalation benefits no one," I continued. "But I will not allow this company's reputation to be weaponized in a domestic dispute." One director leaned back slowly. "Are we exposed?" "No." "And your plan?" "I will release a controlled statement next week." That night, Lauren called again. I answered. She was breathing hard. "You had security escort my mother out of your building." It's my building. Exactly, she snapped. Everything is yours. That's the problem. No, I said quietly. The problem is, you thought I wouldn't notice. Silence. Then softer. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Like what? Like what, Lauren? She murmured. I swear that Ethan was temporary. Temporary? I laughed once. It surprised even me. You brought him to your mother's birthday dinner. She insisted, Lauren said quickly. She thought it would force you to... To what? To care? I closed my eyes briefly. You don't fix neglect with betrayal. I said you neglected me first. The accusation landed heavy. Maybe I had been absent, but absence is not adultery. I'll be filing, I said finally. For what? She whispered. Divorce. Her inhale was sharp. You won't win, she said. People already think you're the villain. Public opinion is fluid. Evidence is not. I don't need to win, I replied. I need to close. She hung up. The next morning, I scheduled a press conference. Small, controlled, select media. If they wanted spectacle, I would provide clarity, not emotion, but documentation. And when Patricia decided to escalate again, bringing Ethan with her this time, she had no idea she was walking into the worst investment of her life. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. the following Tuesday in the Carter Logistics Media Room, a modest space we use for quarterly earnings briefings and industry announcements. No dramatic lighting, no theatrical backdrop, just a podium, a long table, and a large digital screen mounted behind me. I didn't invite gossip bloggers. I invited business reporters, people who valued documentation over drama. At 9:47 a.m., Victoria stepped into my office with a tablet in her hand. They're here, she said. Lauren, Patricia, and Ethan. I paused, mid-buttoning my cuff. Let them in. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly. You're sure? Very. When I walked into the media room at exactly 10 a.m., the low murmur of reporters fell into silence. Cameras adjusted, notepads lifted, and then the doors behind them opened. Lauren entered first, dressed in cream, understated, elegant. Patricia followed in a bright teal suit that demanded attention. Ethan trailed behind, confident, chin lifted. They had come to control the narrative. They didn't realize I had already rewritten it. Lauren's eyes met mine. For a moment, something flickered there. Uncertainty, perhaps. But Patricia placed a hand lightly on her back, and that flicker disappeared. I stepped to the podium. Thank you all for coming on short notice, I began evenly. Over the past week, there have been public allegations regarding my conduct within my marriage. Soft camera clicks. I have chosen not to respond emotionally. I prefer facts. I nodded to Victoria. The large screen behind me illuminated. First image. The private dining room at Grannon Halstead. Timestamp visible. Lauren seated beside Ethan. Patricia smiling. Ethan sitting at the head of the table in my seat. Gasps. Second image. A zoomed-in still frame of the place card bearing my name, folded beneath Ethan's plate. Murmurs grew louder. Patricia shifted visibly in her chair. Lauren's face went pale. This, I continued calmly, was my mother-in-law's 70th birthday dinner. I was 40 minutes late due to a business closing. Upon arrival, I discovered my wife's extramarital partner seated in my assigned position. Ethan's jaw tightened. Extramarital partner? Patricia snapped. That's defamatory. Victoria stepped forward slightly. We are prepared to provide sworn documentation. I raised a hand gently. The screen changed again. Financial statements, condo lease agreements, bank transfers from our joint account into an LLC. The LLC registered to Ethan Blake. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God." I let the silence stretch. For 3 months, I said, funds were diverted to support a separate residence used by my wife and Mr. Blake. Lauren stood abruptly. You invaded my privacy! I met her gaze. You used marital assets. The screen shifted again. A short video clip. Security footage from the West Loop building garage. Lauren's Mercedes entering, Ethan stepping out to greet her, his hand on her lower back. The timestamp matched dates of supposed overnight spa retreats. The room erupted. Reporters leaned forward. Patricia's composure cracked. "This is harassment," she hissed. "You hired someone to follow your own wife." "I hired someone to protect my assets," I replied evenly. Ethan stood now. "This is insane," he said loudly. "You're weaponizing money because you can't handle emotional neglect." There it was, the pivot. I folded my hands over the podium. "I am not here to debate feelings," I said calmly. "I am here to correct misinformation." The screen changed one final time. Audio transcript. Lauren's voice. "I'm tired of being invisible. Daniel thinks money fixes everything." Ethan's response. "Once he transfers more assets into your name, we'll be secure." That line hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's face drained of color. Ethan took a step back. "That's edited," Lauren whispered weakly. "It is certified," Victoria replied. I looked directly at the press. "I have not abandoned my marriage," I said. "I have responded to a breach of fiduciary trust." Someone raised a hand. "Are you filing for divorce?" "Yes." "Will you seek damages?" "Yes." "Do you intend to press fraud charges?" I glanced briefly at Ethan. "If warranted." Patricia lunged verbally. "You're humiliating my daughter!" "No," I said softly. "You humiliated your son-in-law." The shift in public sentiment was almost visible, like a tide pulling back. Sympathy evaporated, the narrative inverted. Lauren's shoulders slumped. Ethan reached for her arm. She didn't take it. The conference ended without theatrics. No shouting, no dramatic exits, just documentation. By 3 p.m., every major Chicago business outlet had published the story. Headlines shifted from "CEO accused of emotional neglect" to "CEO releases evidence of wife's affair and asset diversion." By 6 p.m., Ethan's gym terminated his contract. By 8 p.m., his landlord began proceedings to review the LLC lease. By midnight, my board issued a statement affirming full confidence in my leadership. Lauren called once that evening. I answered. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She spoke very quietly. "You destroyed him." I corrected the record. "You didn't have to make it public. You made it public first." Silence. "You could have handled this privately," she said. I walked to the window of my office, watching traffic thread through downtown Chicago like veins of light. "You brought him to your mother's birthday dinner," I replied. "I was angry." "You were strategic." She exhaled sharply. "So what now?" she asked. "Now," I said, "we let the legal process work." "And if I say I want to fix this?" I closed my eyes briefly. "You don't get to renegotiate after disclosure." Her voice trembled slightly for the first time. "I didn't think you'd fight." I smiled faintly. "I didn't think you'd gamble." The call ended. The next morning, Victoria filed infidelity, financial misconduct, breach of prenuptial clause. Lauren would not receive alimony. Ethan would face inquiry into misuse of transferred funds. Patricia would have to sit with the reality that her spectacle had backfired spectacularly. For the first time since that dinner, I slept uninterrupted. But exposure is only the beginning. Collapse comes next. Collapse is rarely cinematic. It doesn't happen in a single explosive moment. It happens quietly through notices, letters, and phone calls that don't get returned. Within 48 hours of the press conference, Ethan Blake's carefully curated life began to unravel. The gym that had once advertised him as Chicago's premier transformation specialist terminated his contract pending review of ethical conduct. His LinkedIn profile vanished. His landlord sent a notice questioning the validity of the LLC lease once it became clear the funding source was disputed marital property. By the end of the week, the condo keys were surrendered. Lauren moved back into the downtown house. I did not. I had already relocated permanently to the Langham Suite, while Victoria finalized asset enforcement orders. The house technically remained in my name, purchased 6 years before our marriage, paid off entirely from corporate dividends. Legally separate. Lauren tried to use that as leverage. "You can't just abandon your own home," she said during a scheduled mediation session. I folded my hands calmly across the polished table in Victoria's office. "I haven't abandoned anything," I replied. "I've removed myself." The mediator, a gray-haired former judge, reviewed the prenuptial agreement slowly. The infidelity clause was explicit. If either party engaged in extramarital conduct resulting in financial loss or reputational damage, spousal support was forfeited. Lauren had signed it willingly, twice. Her design studio brought in modest income, enough to sustain independence, not lifestyle. Patricia attended the mediation uninvited. "I refuse to let my daughter be left with nothing," she declared loudly. "She is not being left with nothing," Victoria corrected. "She retains her personal earnings and agreed upon property allocations." Patricia leaned forward sharply. 14 years of marriage, and he walks away untouched." I met her gaze evenly. "I didn't walk away untouched," I said quietly. "I walked away intact." Lauren looked exhausted, not theatrical, not defiant, just tired. "What do you want, Daniel?" she asked finally. I considered the question. "Closure, and that costs me everything." "No," I said gently. "That cost you consequences. There is a difference." 2 days later, Ethan attempted his own maneuver. He retained a lawyer, inexperienced and loud, who filed a preliminary claim alleging invasion of privacy and reputational sabotage. Victoria smiled faintly when she read it. "This won't survive preliminary review," she said. "He signed no NDA. He has no contractual standing, and the audio documentation is legally obtained. Will he push it for leverage? Perhaps," she replied. "But he doesn't have the funds to sustain litigation." She was correct. Within 3 weeks, the claim was withdrawn. Meanwhile, something more interesting occurred. Ethan's name surfaced in an internal audit at his former gym. Several reimbursement claims for client events had been expensed to corporate cards. Dates matched Lauren's condo visits. Fraud. Small scale, but documented. The gym pressed charges. I didn't initiate it. Karma doesn't require instruction. Lauren came to see me at the Langham on a rainy Thursday evening. She looked different, less polished, less certain. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. I stepped aside. She stood near the window, watching rain slide down the glass. "I never thought it would go this far," she admitted. "How far did you think it would go?" She didn't answer immediately. "I thought you'd get angry, maybe embarrassed, maybe try to win me back." "I'm not competing," I said calmly. "That's the problem," she snapped suddenly. "You never compete." For a moment, emotion flashed across her face. I needed to feel wanted. "You were, by your schedule." The accusation lingered. "I provided stability," I replied. "You provided control." That word struck differently. Control? Perhaps my order, my discipline, my relentless pursuit of security had created distance. But distance does not justify deception. "I didn't ask you to cheat," I said evenly. She swallowed. "No," she admitted, "you didn't." Silence stretched between us. "What about Ethan?" I asked finally. Her eyes hardened slightly. "He's not what I thought." "People rarely are." "He said you'd settle," she added quietly, "that you wouldn't risk public embarrassment." I almost smiled. He miscalculated. She looked at me for a long time. "You're not angry." "I was," I said honestly, 3 months ago. Now I'm done." That word landed heavier than any accusation. Done. "I don't know how to rebuild," she whispered. "You don't rebuild this," I said gently. "You build something else." She nodded slowly. The divorce hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Ethan, under pressure from mounting legal trouble, disappeared from Chicago entirely. Rumor had it, he relocated to Phoenix without Lauren. Patricia, meanwhile, discovered that the lake house, her pride, was owned by Carter Holdings, not Lauren. Maintenance expenses were reviewed. Access was suspended, pending resolution of asset disputes. Patricia called me directly that night. "You've frozen my lake house," she demanded. "It's not your lake house," I corrected calmly. "It was a gift. It was a courtesy." Her breathing was sharp. "You've ruined my daughter." "No," I said evenly. "I stopped financing her mistakes." She hung up. By the time the divorce hearing arrived, public interest had cooled. Business cycles move quickly. Scandal fades. Documentation endures. In court, the judge reviewed the prenuptial agreement, the financial transfers, and the documented affair. No theatrics, no shouting, just legal language. The ruling was swift. Divorce granted. No alimony. Reimbursement required for diverted funds. Legal fees assigned proportionally. Lauren didn't look at me as we left the courtroom. Patricia glared. I felt no triumph, only clarity. But collapse rarely ends cleanly, and desperation, when cornered, becomes dangerous. Desperation doesn't announce itself. It seeps in quietly through unpaid bills, diminishing attention, and the slow realization that sympathy has an expiration date. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Ethan resurfaced, not in Phoenix, but in Chicago. He arrived unannounced at Carter Logistics on a Monday morning at 8:15 a.m., just as employees were filing in with coffee cups and laptops. Security called me immediately. "He says he has information that could damage your company," the head of security reported evenly. "Of course he does. Let him into the conference room," I said. "Have Victoria present." Ethan walked in, wearing the same overconfidence he'd worn at the birthday dinner, but thinner now, edges frayed, eyes restless. "You're looking well, Daniel," he said casually, sitting without invitation. "State your purpose," Victoria replied before I could. He leaned back. "I'm willing to settle," he said quietly. "For what?" I asked. "For defamation." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "You withdrew that claim," she said calmly. He smiled faintly. "That was procedural." "Be specific," I said. Ethan slid a flash drive across the table. "There are recordings," he said. "Conversations. Lauren venting about your controlling tendencies, how you isolated her financially." Victoria didn't touch the drive. "Are these recordings obtained with consent?" she asked. Ethan hesitated half a second. "That's irrelevant." "It's entirely relevant," she replied coolly. He shifted tactics. "You think the board wants to hear that you monitored your wife? That you hired investigators?" "I did neither illegally," I said evenly. "You're not untouchable." "No," I agreed, "but I am documented." Silence stretched. "What do you want?" I asked. $50,000, he said bluntly, "and I disappear." Victoria smiled faintly. "Extortion is a federal offense," she said. His jaw tightened. "It's compensation for what? For emotional distress?" I leaned forward slightly. "You entered into a relationship with a married woman," I said calmly. "You participated in financial diversion, and you attempted litigation without standing." He swallowed. "You don't get paid for losing." He stood abruptly. "You'll regret this," he said. "Perhaps," I replied evenly, "but not financially." Security escorted him out. Victoria waited until the door closed. "He's unraveling," she observed. "Desperate men make loud mistakes," I said. And he did. 2 days later, he sent the flash drive to a minor online outlet known for scandal pieces. The article published under a sensational headline, "CEO's Wife Claims Emotional Manipulation." But the recordings, poorly edited and clearly taken without Lauren's consent, lacked context. More importantly, they contradicted his earlier claim of temporary companionship. Victoria responded immediately. Cease and desist letters, notice of unlawful recording, formal complaint to the platform. Within 48 hours, the article was removed. The outlet issued a retraction, citing insufficient verification. Ethan's last leverage evaporated. Lauren called me that night. Not angry, not shakily, He said you'd cave. I don't, shakily. He said you'd cave. I don't negotiate under threat. I see that now. There was a long pause. I'm sorry, she said finally. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't self-serving. It sounded sincere. I believe you, I replied. She hesitated. Do you ever think about what could have been different? Yes, I said honestly. And I think we stopped being curious about each other. Silence. I don't hate you, she said. I don't hate you either. That truth surprised me. Anger had burned out weeks ago. What remained was distance, measured, final. Meanwhile, Ethan's situation worsened. The gym audit turned into a formal investigation. Evidence of falsified reimbursement claims reached local prosecutors. Minor charges, but enough to permanently stain his reputation. No one wanted to hire a trainer linked to fraud and scandal. He left Chicago again, this time without announcement. Patricia attempted one final maneuver. She requested a private meeting. Against Victoria's advice, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe near Lincoln Park. She looked older, less composed. You've made your point, she said without greeting. My daughter lost her marriage. Ethan's gone. The press has moved on. I didn't make a point, I replied calmly. I responded. You could still help her. She is financially independent. She is embarrassed. That's not a solvable line item. Her lips trembled slightly. You were supposed to protect her. I held her gaze. I did, I said. For 14 years. She had no response. We parted without resolution. Desperation had exhausted itself. There were no more threats, no more articles, no more midnight calls, only paperwork and silence. Victoria stopped by my office one evening after a board review. It's over, she said simply. Legally, yes. Emotionally? She considered that. That part, she said carefully, is up to you. I walked to the window again. The same skyline I'd built my life beneath. The city looked unchanged, but I wasn't. I hadn't lost a wife. I had lost an illusion. And in its place, something steadier had formed. Something clearer. What I didn't expect was what would follow next. Because sometimes when you close a chapter with dignity, life opens one with possibility. 6 months after the divorce, Chicago moved on. Markets fluctuated. Headlines shifted. New scandals replaced old ones. But something unexpected happened in the quiet space that followed collapse. I felt lighter, not triumphant, not vindicated, just unburdened. The company expanded into 3 additional Midwestern hubs that quarter. We secured a federal logistics contract that would stabilize revenue for the next decade. I was appointed chairman by unanimous board vote, a role I'd once postponed because family balance mattered more than title. Victoria was in that boardroom when the vote passed. She didn't clap. She didn't smile broadly. She simply nodded once, a professional acknowledgement of earned position. Later that evening, we found ourselves alone in my office reviewing compliance reports. Congratulations, Chairman Carter, she said dryly, handing me a pen. Don't start, I replied. She smirked faintly. You've handled worse titles. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, not charged, but comfortable. For months, our conversations had revolved around depositions, filings, enforcement motions. Now there was no case left to manage. You don't have to keep scheduling these check-ins, she said lightly. Legally speaking, you're stable. I prefer stability, I replied. Professionally, in general. She studied me carefully. You've been stable for a long time, Daniel, she said, but you've rarely been open. The word lingered. Open. Perhaps she was right. Control is armor. Armor is heavy. You were prepared, she continued. Most men in your position would have reacted emotionally. I reacted strategically and emotionally. I considered that quietly. She didn't press further. Instead, she closed the folder and leaned back slightly. I admire that, she said simply. Not admiration of wealth, not admiration of dominance, but admiration of restraint. It was the first compliment in months that felt uncalculated. 3 weeks later, she invited me to dinner. Not business, not negotiation, just dinner. A small Italian restaurant on the north side. No press, no board members, no posturing. We spoke about things that had nothing to do with law or logistics. Her years as a federal prosecutor, my first warehouse, her failed engagement in her early 30s, my early marriage doubts I never voiced. There was no competition, no performance, no need to prove superiority. She didn't need my money. I didn't need her validation. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't defending anything. Months passed. Lauren rebuilt quietly. She sold the downtown house, the portion allocated to her, and relocated to a smaller condo. Her design studio grew modestly through independent contracts. We spoke occasionally, civil, brief. There was no hostility left, only history. Patricia moved into assisted living near Lake Geneva after refinancing her home to manage accumulated debt. I never interfered. Ethan faded into obscurity. The last I heard, he was working freelance out of state, his name scrubbed from professional listings. Desperation eventually consumes itself. 1 year after the dinner, Victoria and I attended a corporate gala, same city, different stage. As we stepped into the ballroom, I felt a flicker of memory, white linens, head tables, orchestrated humiliation. But this room felt different, balanced, secure. Victoria wore a simple navy gown, no excess jewelry, no need for spectacle. "You're quiet," she observed. "I was thinking about a dinner," I said. She smiled faintly. "The infamous one?" "Yes, and I'm grateful for it, for clarity." She reached for my hand, not dramatically, not for attention, just because she wanted to. Later that evening, as speeches concluded and applause echoed softly through the hall, she leaned closer. "You know," she said quietly, "you never once tried to impress me." "I don't perform well under that strategy," I replied. She smiled. "Good," she said, "because I don't need to be impressed. I need to be respected." "I respect you," I said honestly. "And I respect you." No rush, no theatrical declarations, just recognition. 2 months later, on a quiet autumn afternoon overlooking Lake Michigan, I asked her a simple question. "Would you consider building something with me?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied me the way she studies contracts, thoroughly, deliberately. "Equal footing?" she asked. "Always." "No rescues?" "No rescues." "No power plays?" "Never." She extended her hand. "Then yes." No ring presentation, no audience, just agreement. That winter, the board officially announced our expansion into international shipping. The press described me as resilient. They missed the point. Resilience wasn't what defined that year. Clarity did. Clarity about boundaries, about respect, about the difference between providing and being valued. Sometimes people ask me, quietly, privately, if I regret not fighting harder for my marriage. I tell them this: you don't fight for something that's already been traded. You protect what remains. And sometimes what remains is your dignity. If you've ever walked out of a room where you were meant to be diminished, if you've ever chosen silence over spectacle, I want you to know something. Calm does not mean weak. Strategic does not mean cold. And walking away is not losing. It's choosing yourself. I'd like to know, have you ever faced a moment like that? A table where you realize you were being tested? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day about strength, consequences, and rebuilding with clarity. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let's keep walking forward together.